Strengthen your understanding of governance and policy design. The 12-week graduate course in public policy begins 10th January 2026. Apply by 30th November 2025 to avail a 10% early bird scholarship.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to this episode of All Things Policy. My name is Shobhankita Reddy and I'm a researcher with the High-Tech Geopolitics program at the Takshashila Institution. For this episode, I'm joined by Amit Kumar. Amit is a staff research analyst with the Indo-Pacific Studies program and the China desk with the Takshashila Institution. Amit, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Shobhankita.
So for this episode, we want to be discussing China's 15th five-year plan. And this is an interesting document, and it's an important document that China puts out every 5 years or so. And the first five-year plan was spanned between 1953 and 1957. And interestingly, 1953 was also the year that Xi Jinping was born. So here we have Xi Jinping unveiling this document in 2025, and it's set to span between 2026 and 2030. So this is an important plan, and looks like many of the recommendations of this document will go through in Feb-March 2026 when the plenum convenes. So Amit, I want you to talk about, firstly, why is this document so important? Because it gets a lot of attention. And secondly, what makes this particular document stand out?
Yeah, so Shubhankita, so as you know, as you mentioned, China is a command economy, and it relies on making plans and adopting from Soviet era this mechanism. They have a five-year plan that they keep coming up with every 5 years, obviously. Now, this is a document that is of the 15th five-year plan, and the timeline, the years, and when this will be implemented would start from 2026, that is next year, and will continue till 2030. Now, this assumes a significance because one, like all five-year plan documents, it contains certain objectives, major objectives, where the government has to, put its attention, put its money. It is kind of guiding document that also guides private enterprises, etc., as to what the direction of the growth and development should be. So, from that point of view, a five-year plan is usually helpful. Even India used to have five-year plans before. Now we have done away with it. But why this 15th five-year plan in China's case becomes very important is because now this marks the beginning of the last decade, or the decade that will culminate into the cutoff year of 2035. That is the threshold year, that a limit or a timeline that has been set by Xi Jinping to achieve China's socialist modernization. It's also what they call it their second centenary goal. The first centenary goal was accomplished in 2021. This is the second centenary goal. By 2035, they have to reach this particular goal, which is described as, or the vision of China's socialist modernization, becoming that high income country. So from that perspective, this becomes important. And clearly after this, the 16th five-year plan will be the last five-year plan that will put China at that particular time where it'll have to declare itself as socialist modern country. So therefore, this is a critical stage, because you can't, last 5 years, you can't get a lot of things done. 10 years is a good time period to a timeline to make certain programs, start certain projects to materialize that particular plan. So from that perspective, this becomes very important, and the document does point out certain major objectives, the features of what China's socialist modernization would look like.
Yeah. Thanks, Amit. Before we dive into what these features of the document, as you may have identified them to be, are, let's first talk about what the document says are the challenges that China faces, firstly at the domestic front and also in the international arena. And I think this is important because it offers us some vague, ambiguous signals into what the Chinese leadership perhaps thinks it's facing and what the important macro landscape of the world looks like. So maybe you can highlight that for us to begin with.
Yeah, sure. So both internal. So the document begins by stating why this document is crucial, and then straight away dives into what the current challenges, both on international and domestic front, are for the Communist Party of China and China. Uh, and the challenges are something which we are all well aware of, and I think even the CPC recognizes those challenges. On international front, I think what they say is that the global power of balance is shifting. They see a rapid technological revolution, and also the fact that there's a deep tech rivalry that is emerging between the US and China. Although they did not name US, but you can take the hint. And they talk about how the conflicts that have taken hold over across the world, be it in the subcontinent, if you and Southeast Asia, if you look at Myanmar, uh, in the region of Myanmar, or in Middle East, or in you say Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, right? How they have impacted the regional or the global order, and how you have seen. I mean, this is what the Chinese are saying: unilateralism and protectionism is impacting international trade order. So this is something which they take very seriously, and I've highlighted this as a major challenge when it comes to international arena. On the domestic front, the challenges are mostly economic, and they do say that subdued consumption is something which they have been confronting, and they would actually like consumption to pick up, right? So this is something. Unemployment is something that they talk about on the domestic front. So I think these are the challenges that they talk about. But what they do also say is that while this flux, both in geopolitical and domestic front, presents challenges for the Chinese, it is also an opportunity. They see an opportunity in this during this time, which they can leverage and take advantage of, and uh, come at the top of this whole thing.
Yeah. A changing world order that tips the balance towards China is good news for China, and I think the document clearly reveals that they seem to agree with that as well. But again, it also has highlighted some challenges, and these are the usual ones, right? Unemployment, domestic demand and consumption being low, economic challenges because of protectionism in the international arena. These are all already sort of well known. And of course, there's opportunity there. There's some challenge also that China would need to navigate through. Specifically, let's come to the domestic demand and consumption, right? Because we have seen quite a lot of talk about this, about how China must not have a system that's financially repressed and must seek to, in their own view, increase domestic consumption. Because especially if trade barriers restrict the export of Chinese goods, then perhaps a market can be cultivated domestically. At least that's the hope. But there are ideological differences and difficulties to make that happen. What does this document particularly say about this? And do you see any material action towards actually increasing consumption domestically in China? Because that would be quite difficult to do.
Yeah, see, in the last 5 years, I think what we have seen is there's a lot of focus on domestic consumption from for China to, and this is something which I think was started and initiated by uh, the international commentators or foreign commentators on Chinese economy. That Chinese economy is investment led, and it does not allow for domestic consumption to prop up, and it is keeping the consumption subdued, and therefore you have a lot of problems as a result of this. In the international economic order, the trading order is under flux. So, as a result of these things, because China is offloading a lot of surplus, trade surplus, and that flows from subdued domestic demand and household consumption. So, obviously, this is something which the Chinese have taken note of, and the past 3-4 years, I think they have been saying that consumption has to become a primary engine of growth in the Chinese economy. But and in this document also, domestic demand emerges as the top priority, I would say, for if Xi's vision, if you have to take hold of, look at what Xi's vision of modern socialist China entails. I think what the domestic consumption driven economy is something which is going to be a key pillar of that China in that sense. So obviously, it uh, gets a lot of attention from the party in the document. But the only problem is that this is all talk, and nothing on ground seems, to me at least, seems that the government is serious in addressing this problem. I mean, they are serious. They seriously acknowledge the problem is there, but I think they're limited in how they have to address this challenge. There are ideological objections, ideological in the sense that what the other commentators or economists argue or they suggest is China increase fiscal spending, right? But that is something which China is, and partly some form of welfareism, put cash in the hands of people so that people can consume more. So that is one, but that is something in that Chinese are very opposed to. If you see, if they and this is a learning that they've taken from the European economies and how welfareism in Europe has put them in a lot of trouble, right? Second is an objection on the strategic front. If they do this, if domestic demand becomes a primary engine, and it would mean that the investment comes down. And if that happens, that would mean that uh, what the kind of dominance that China holds on the manufacturing sector or in the industrial sector, that will have to let go. It will have to let go of that thing. So that is a strategic choice that they have to make, and they still, I don't think, have an answer how to address this problem.
Thanks, Amit. Because you've already mentioned investments, is there any mention about? I mean, the Chinese model has been one of guiding capital to make things happen, right? And this is vast amounts of capital that can then mobilize vast amounts of resources, state capacity, people, time, all of that. And that is how really China's growth model has also been made possible. Is there any sense for what that model has had in terms of adverse effects? For example, it might have led to a lot of wasteful spending, and we have seen that multiple times in different kinds of sectors. Also, overcapacity and dumping that the international community has then sort of, Chinese products have faced a backlash. And also, domestic competition has just been so intense because of some of this that in recent documents, we see this term about involution and how that's perhaps not an ideal. And, it has also caused the sense of companies dying out and mergers and acquisitions being forced and competition being just super brutal, almost Hunger Games capitalism style. Is there any mention or acknowledgement of any of these things in the document?
Yes, see, I think when we talk about economic growth or GDP growth, there are two investments and domestic consumption are the two primary drivers. And in China's case, investment has done a lot of heavy lifting. If you look at the average from 2000 to 2024, I think China's investments as a percent of GDP has been somewhere around 43 or 42%. And this is extremely, extremely high. The global average is somewhere about 26%. So you can see that's almost double, right? And as a result of which, you have the logical corollary of that is that you would have subdued consumption. And in that sense, China's last 20-25 years average would come out to be around 38-39% of GDP. And in comparison, the global average would be somewhere around 58, 56%. So that's a huge difference. And when you that percentage, when you convert that into aggregate form, given that China's economy is so big, that makes the impact is a lot, right? And certainly, if when to respond to your question, if the government's plan going forward is to uh, have consumption as the driving force, it does mean that investment will have to come down. And to make up for that, and yes, but as I said, there's a strategic problem, that strategic choice that China has to make, and therefore bringing down investment uh, is not a straight answer to this problem, right? So the answer that the Chinese are looking at, or the solution that they're looking at, is uh, increasing the rate of return on investment, or what they're calling it as effective investments. So we are all aware that even though investments in China has been extremely high, and China has reaped benefits of it over the years, and this has been uh, a regular criticism of the Chinese model, that it has led to a lot of wasteful investments. And now what we are seeing is the twin problems of this investment-led model, in the form of overcapacity and involution that you mentioned, right? Where you're producing more than what you can consume, one, and therefore two, consequences of that is either you undersell, either the prices, you get into a price war wherein the prices get so low for the domestic market, or you have to offload the product in the external market. And this is really where the political problem is has come about, right? And so the Chinese answer is that yes, there's a recognition, as you asked, there's a recognition that although they do not mention the document, even though involution is a term that the Chinese government itself borrowed, right, and has to refer to what the price wars are happening in China, especially how it unfolded in the EV sector, and previously it had unfolded in the cement or steel sector, right? So they do not mention involution or overcapacity, but in there's a reference to both these phenomena, and there's an acknowledgement. And what the document says is that they need to take stock of this particular thing, that the guidance, whatever guidance the central government has or has had in the past, they have not translated, or maybe have not been properly communicated to the local governments, because local governments are the I would say the point of intervention. If you have to address both involution and overcapacity, they're the point of intervention. And local governments have been accused of peddling both these problems because of another. There's a whole certain debate how the political uh, incentive structure is structured, and how the taxes are structured, etc. So there's a recognition of that we have invested so much, but a lot of that investment has not given us the kind of rate of return that we would want. And there's a huge scope to increase productivity, and to increase rate of return on investments. And therefore what we have to do is, if we do effective investments, the investments can come down, but the return could remain similar to what we were having. So earlier, say if you were investing about 100 rupees, and the return that you were getting was about 150 rupees, the plan now is to and because a lot of that was also wasteful, the plan is now to reduce the investment to about say 60, and then still get a return of 150 rupees, or Chinese yuan in China. So that's something how the Chinese are thinking about striking a balance between both consumption and investment.
Already spoken about. Again, very difficult to do, very difficult to implement. But at least this is what the plan on paper looks like. Moving on, I want to talk about the other major objective as laid out by the document, which is about scientific and technological breakthroughs, and especially being able to be self-reliant when it comes to technology. Since taking power, I think Xi Jinping has driven China's tech ambitions almost into an overdrive. It's become a lot of, emphasis on self-reliance, on new technological breakthroughs, not necessarily being able to adapt and come up with applications that might build upon other people's innovations, but also upon original research, original innovations, and coming up with some of them in-house. What does this document specifically say? Are there any specific sectors that are important, or previously were important, and now no longer are important? Any reading there sector-wise?
I think science and tech self-reliance is a priority. I think that came into picture about 6 7 years ago, and it is largely the decoupling of tech, which we largely talk about, or de-risking, but in terms of tech, in higher end technology, decoupling is something, and there's a larger consensus on this, that this was actually initiated by Chinese and not the Americans. Americans just responded in 2020 to the larger trend that was already taking shape, because China wanted to be uh, independent and self-reliant when it came to leading science and technology, or what they call it, core technologies. So they identify core technologies as, again, IC, industrial machine tools, basic software, advanced materials, and manufacturing. In the document, these are the core technologies that they are trying to have a sense of self-reliance or self-independence. And it says that in areas where, and there's a recognition that this is what we have to achieve, it not necessarily something that they have already achieved, right? And there's a recognition, and therefore it says, the document says that wherever applicable, we should keep our whatever pace of catching up, or we should keep catching up to the American or the Western tech. I mean, they're not mentioned Western tech, but that's the sentiment there. And wherever applicable, if you have got certain lead in certain areas, etc., you should keep that lead and maintain that lead and not let that lead go away, right? So this is the whole thinking behind this. Now, the things that they're saying how to, achieve this would is one, that there's a plan to devolve a greater share of total R&D spending towards these uh, technologies that I just mentioned. Now, this is interesting. Like, if you compare today the aggregate expenditure of the US and the American Chinese state, I think US spends about $820 billion annually on research and development. China is not far behind with $780 billion. And this is a huge jump from about $120 billion in 2007. So, and India's, I mean, if you compare put India, because we're talking about this in India, just to paint a picture, India's R&D is about what? Less than 100, definitely less than 100, but about $50 billion or something, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong, but that's the number that I remember. So we are far way behind, and I mean, not far behind what China was spending back in 2007, right? So that's something which they plan to do, and they plan to devolve greater share of this spending. One, increase the spending itself, but devolve greater spending on these core technologies, and a lot of emphasis on original and disruptive innovation. How you make disruptive. Now, another thing, I think what they have got quite correctly in this sense is how consumption can play a role in innovation, and this is a very constant reiteration of this principle, that no matter what technology you create, whatever breakthrough technology that you come up with, you need to find consumer applications for all those technologies, put that into practice. Otherwise, what's the need of any technology, right? If you can create a EV battery, but not produce EVs, no reason to have a lead in that. So there's a constant, and this is something which is, I think, economists and even others, strategic thinkers, keep on telling you that. I mean, I wouldn't say strategic thinkers, but yeah, economists do point out this thing, that consumption is a huge enabler of innovation in any economy, because that creates competition, right? If it's a free and open, fair market, right? So this is something which the Chinese have got, and there's a constant directive that is being issued, that any new technology that you create, one, you have to be at the forefront of it. But as soon as you create a breakthrough technology, there has to be a integration of industry, academia, and business, and you have to find consumer applications for all those technologies. So I think that's very interesting for me, at least, to find that kind of nuance in a document like this.
Yeah. No, that's actually quite interesting. What about also the new quality productive forces, which is just sort of Chinese jargon to say new technologies? So, amidst a declining economy, high unemployment, um, looks like one thing that the Xi Jinping administration has been doubling down is this belief that innovation could drive economic growth, and that investment in innovation could leapfrog um, economic growth far more than what traditional industry can. What do you see of that in this document? And one thing that was interesting to me also was that it's not like the traditional industries have been left behind. The document continues to mention all the way back from construction and all the traditional industries. So, where is that focus, if at all there is? Because no sector seems to have been left behind, and yet there is this veneer that this new technology could perhaps leapfrog economic growth. So, how do you square both of these?
See, so to answer your question on new quality productive forces, I mean, they started using the phrase somewhere in 2023 or late 2023, if I'm not wrong. And it's largely been vague. At different points of time, they have explained it as something different. So you can have a sense of, you can go through the document and say, but essentially what it means is, yeah, as you said, innovation leading to new technologies, leading to new sectors or industries, which can become a economy of its own, right? So this is what new quality productive forces are. Basically, the emphasis is on innovation, creating the new technology, and that driving, becoming into an industry or sector of itself. That is what the plan is. Now, you said that they had not when they talk about industry, etc. There's an emphasis on traditional industry as well. So yeah, that is one interesting, I think, point to take note of when you read about what the Chinese are thinking. So there's something called as modernized industrial system is what their major objective or a feature of China's socialist modernization has to be. And that you would see when you talk of modern industrial system, you would think that, okay, climbing up the value chain, right? But, and as how it happened in case of Japan or Asian tigers, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, etc., right? Like you ended up moving up the value chain. But China doesn't seem to be believing in moving up the value chain. I mean, it does want to move up the value chain, but without leaving that lower and low key technological or manufacturing to the others. It wants to retains onto that share of manufacturing, and this is very crucial because one of the key aims is to keep China's manufacturing as a percentage of its GDP at an appropriate level. That is what they say. They do not define a number, but at present, the number is about 25%. And I think the appropriate level also means a number around that, right? And if you see, China has been able to hold on to this figure only because it dominates both primary, secondary, and I would say upstream and downstream industries. And the moment it starts to move up the value chain and lets go of these downstream industries or things like construction and cement, etc., mining, etc., it will be a huge loss, and that would reflect in manufacturing percentage as a percentage of GDP. So the goal is to keep that and also have higher end. And the goal is to innovate and upgrade these traditional industries. Whatever traditional industries you have more maybe automation, have more robots working for them, make those traditional industry much more modern. But modern itself in itself does not mean climbing up the value chain and leaving the traditional industries. So there's very much an emphasis on keeping those intact, right? And it also says, I mean, and when you think of industrial system, largely we think of manufacturing itself, but no, there's also an emphasis on services industry. And the document says that we need to open new markets, open China to new markets, especially in services sector, because I think there's an acknowledgement when they say especially services sector. I think there's an inherent, an implicit acknowledgement that beyond what they actually have now in manufacturing, it's very difficult to expand that share as a percent of GDP. So largely, what you have to do when you look outwards is expand services sectors, right? So yeah, that's what they mean, and they want to have total control of I think both traditional, then upcoming industries, and with that, the services as well.
Yeah. And when they say services, what do they exactly mean? And if I can ask you, what is China's strength when it comes to the export of some of these services?
I don't think we hear much about Chinese services a lot. I mean, there are, of course, in terms of services, largely China's strengths are similar to India. But again, India's IT sector gets highlighted a lot because the disproportionate role it plays in Indian economy. That is not somewhat what is the case with the Chinese economy. So it gets slightly downplayed. But I think IT sector is again something which is a strength of Chinese services. But of course, we do not hear much about the strengths of Chinese services, and something that also I don't follow a lot, because a lot of conversation is always around manufacturing, other segments of this thing. But this is one key priority that the Chinese have identified, that services share, as I mean, in the three industries, the three primary, has to increase and has to become much more uh, productive. It has to find new applications. And what they talk about is they want to put in place a system where your manufacturing and services are integrated. So this is what they call integration of manufacturing and services sector. And services have to flow out from those manufacturing capabilities that they are preparing for, or new capabilities that keep coming up. Those services have to be in line or integrated with those manufacturing capabilities. And I think this is a smart idea, because then one industry can take the other. If one rises, the other will rise too, if you make an integrated system in that sense. So yeah. And something I forgot about mentioning when this modernized industrial system, when we started talking about this document, again within this section, identifies two types of industries. One is emerging and strategic industries, and one is the industries of future. Strategic emerging industries would be where China wants to, again, this is different from core technologies. Core technologies could have industry of their own, but this is especially talking about in types of industries. So this is where they want to have that the China should keep focusing, and these are identified as new energy, whatever. And this is not, I think, one key area where they're actually building on is hydrogen and hydrogen related energy thing. New materials, something where Japan actually leads the world, very high end materials. So this is something that the Chinese want to have dominance in. Aviation and aerospace, and low altitude economy, that is your drone centered economy. So this is something, I mean, to have this in your 15th 5-year plan or 15th 5-year plan document, that you need to build an economy around drone, etc. So that is something really interesting. So this, it calls upon itself to create industrial clusters and have and treat these as strategic and emerging sectors. Now what you would see is, now what this would do is that now, before the final 15th 5-year plan is adopted and is finalized at NPC in March 2026 next year, you'll have a lot of other provinces also finalize their 15th 5-year plan from January to March, just before the national NPC session takes place, just before the central government finalizes its 15th 5-year plan. All 32 provinces and other municipalities will have to finalize their 15th 5-year plan. And these sectors are where you'll get these local provinces will put their money. And right, and interesting to note is what for the past 3 5-year plans, you had EVs as one of the strategic and emerging sectors. This time they have, it has been taken out, and largely the reason is because there's a consensus and there's a acknowledgement that EV has now gotten to that stage where it does not need support. And largely the emphasis is on consolidating EV companies. At one point there were about 110 to 120 EV companies operating in China. The number has come down to about 40, and this again an effort. So China plans to phase out all the subsidies to the this EV sector by 2027. So one more year, and has already withdrawn some of the subsidies, and gradual withdrawal will happen, will complete by 2027. So this is one key takeaway, that EV is no longer a strategic and emerging sector because it has already become one of the crowning jewels of Chinese economy. So, and the second type of industries that the Chinese have identified is the industries of future. And they would be your quantum technology, biomanufacturing, hydrogen and nuclear fusion power, brain computer interfaces, embodied AI, and 6G mobile communications. Again, there's a strict directive that you need to find applications when you do these things. Do your research, come up with the breakthrough ideas, come up with the core and breakthrough technologies. But once you do that, have consumer applications ready. Think of how consumers would like to use these technologies. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And I just want to go back to the services point and also point out that China is big on what they call embodied AI, which is that it's not just about coming up with AI models and applications, but it's about integrating that also into hardware systems, which is why the emphasis on robots and making things interconnected and smarter and so on, right? So the idea that software on its own is not perhaps what they want for themselves, but integrated with hardware into the manufacturing ecosystem is an emphasis. And again, it ties in very well with what you just said, that it's the interconnected manufacturing and services. It's not necessarily just services or just manufacturing. Just final, sort of questions to you. The document also speaks quite a bit about demographic transition, which is that nudging the younger population to look at marriage and kids in a way that perhaps the previous generation didn't. And also, I want to ask you about common prosperity, because we've seen just in the last 5 years that the state cranking down on internet companies in the guise of common prosperity has hurt foreign investments into China quite a bit. It has hurt the stock market. And I think there is some acknowledgement of that now, as much as that was perhaps necessary for the CCP to sort of maintain its legitimacy, because the tech companies and their owners were becoming too large, to the point that they were perhaps upstanding their own selves. Where are we now on common prosperity? So two things: demographic transition and common prosperity.
See, on demographic transition, I think this again acknowledgement that China is an aging economy now. The dependence ratio is increasing, and then you have to come up with plans to weather this challenge of declining birth rates, etc., increasing old age population. So I think uh, I think the plan is threefold. One, encouraging people to look positively at marriage, the institution of marriage, and childbearing, and then making child parenting or etc., the cost of parenting etc., to keep bring that cost down, either by of be it of childbirth or education, childcare subsidies, etc. So this is one part of the strategy. The second part of the strategy is to have ancillary facilities or extend ancillary support to the institution of childbearing, right? So have insurance, maternity insurance system in place, maternal care, boost maternal care, etc., parental leave, better services for women in the early stages of pregnancy, etc., reproductive health. This is what the second strategy is. Third is that to acknowledge this shift and transition and build a silver economy. So that would be giving support to your elderlies, super elderlies above the age of 80, but then again, gradually also extending the age of retirement, etc., and gradually moving towards a silver economy. So accepting this truth, the transition that is happening, and moving towards a silver economy. So these are the three pronged strategy that the document talks about with regard to the demographic transition. Now, with respect to common prosperity, I mean, you said how the crackdown was justified, especially with respect to Jack Ma and Alibaba, right? So I think common prosperity is still described as an immutable goal of China's socialist modernization, and they have set out proper plans. I mean, I wouldn't say very pointed plans, but they're broad plans, and there are 3 to 4 ways in how they plan to do it, right? So the first strategy to bring common prosperity, or the first action point, intervention point would be is to have high quality employment. So there's a recognition that unemployment is this greatest hurdle to achieving common prosperity. So employment is something that you have to boost and think of innovative ways of creating new jobs, creating new employment. How that is to be done, that is again, that is for the policy makers at the lower rung to decide. But this is what the plan looks like, that you have to work on employment. Second, it talks about, and it does say that there will be other means of redistribution, but employment and raising personal incomes will be the mainstay of the redistributive strategy. So I think but they're not discounting other forms of redistribution, but they say that the raising personal incomes would be the mainstay of this distributive strategy. And how they want to do it, again, increase they get into superficial languages such as more productivity, etc. So this is how they want to ensure it. They also say that there have to be, even though things, more productivity, labor productivity has to be increased, but there have to be certain safeguards for wage workers, right? Daily wage workers, because common prosperity, they would the major part of the action, the target group that has to be touched upon, right? If you have to attain common prosperity. So there have to be, the plan is to bring increase in wages, ensuring full employment. So one thing that has been happening in the past one or year or so in China is that the wage workers are not being paid completely. So therefore, there's an emphasis on full payment and bring in some sort of a collective wage bargaining mechanism, and also to bring in minimum wage adjustments, which they were very liberal with it because they wanted manufacturing and the labor-intensive industries to do well. But now this is somewhat what they're thinking. Now, lastly and very importantly, they say that redistribution has to happen as per the hard work, whatever your quality or whatever productivity you're bringing to the economy. So that it has to happen. That should be the principle. But it does not discount that it says that people who are already well publicly, they're kind of prosperous and rich, it nudges those section of the population to help others reach common prosperity. So this is something which was interesting, still interesting. So this is something which the Chinese have not done away with, taking from the rich and giving back to the poor. Not in principle, but they do say that it has to be according to what the quality of work or the kind of hard work that they do. And they qualify it with the second thing, that raising personal income is supposed to be the mainstay of any redistributive strategies. They'll have other strategies, but that has to be the mainstay.
Yeah. And somewhere in that, would you say, is an acknowledgement that China is now also an unequal society, and all of these measures are in some way to bridge that?
Yeah, of course. The idea of common prosperity itself came in because China realized that the party realized that there's a huge inequality that needs to be addressed, and if that is not addressed, that might become a political problem going forward for the party, right? So therefore, there's a lot of emphasis on common prosperity. It is not just an economic project, but a political project for the party.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much, Amit. I think this is a great way for somebody who's not read the 50 odd pages that the document is, to really take away what the important things and the signaling, more importantly, and what the thinking behind some of these eventual words on paper are from the Chinese perspective. So this has been very helpful. Do you have any closing thoughts? Do you have anything that we may have missed out that you want to point?
Not much, but yeah, I think it will be interesting how what final shape it takes in the NPC next year. I think most of the recommendations will remain same, and it will be adopted in its entirety at the NPC. But you'll have a lot more detail as the provinces come up with their 15th five-year plan in the run-up to the NPC session March. So I think it will be interesting to see how the policy directions that the recommendations point to, how they are being perceived by local governments across China. So I think that is something that one needs to look out for.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting 3 months, and perhaps we can have a follow-up conversation if you think there's sufficiently interesting things to discuss in the subsequent documents that come out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.